Hey everyone, welcome to the Catholic Entrepreneur Podcast. I am your host, Mitch Fisher. I'm so excited today because as you're probably noticing if you're watching on video, I have some new equipment. I have a camera and I have a new microphone. So I'm really excited about this new equipment to help increase the quality of the podcast, not only for the listeners, but the viewers on Spotify and YouTube. So hopefully you can feel, see, and hear the difference. I'm really excited about this. Today's guest will come in here soon, but first, question for you. What was your best experience with a Catholic business that you can remember in recent memory? I want you to tweet me, post to the Instagram, the Catholicpreneur. Let me know. This one would be cool if you had like a video testimonial, just like a really good experience you had with a Catholic business owner, a Catholic business recently that you were doing business with. Let me know. I'm curious. Without further ado, today's guest is Patrick Krekelberg. Patrick is actually a self-employed engineer. I'm going to let him do most of the speaking for himself. But he's got a lot of cool, I guess you could say, projects that he has going on. So without further ado, let's bring in Patrick. Patrick, how are you doing? So good to have you on. Good. Thank you for taking the time to hop on the podcast. You are the very first guest with my new microphone. So congratulations. I just got this microphone today for this episode. So
it's like an SM7B, is that right?
That's right. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. I was using a Yeti before. I don't know exactly what it's called. It was way lesser quality than this one. So yeah, we're excited. But why don't you go ahead and kick us off just introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Well, I've been doing product development for 11 years now independently. I'm an engineer going back 24 years. I guess I've kind of always been that. Like, you kind of think about what you wanted to be when you were 10 or so, and pretty much what I pictured, I just didn't know what it was called at the time, is to produce technology and to design products and things like that. And back in 2017, kind of fed that into mostly focusing on the music industry, but also still doing some of the kind of legacy projects that we had before. So my wife and I have kind of leveraged that into building a sort of freer life for our kids, and through homeschooling and travel. We don't have any kind of permanent residence necessarily, as much as your standard kind of homesteader would say. And so, depending on the time of year, we're in different parts of the country. I'll just say that. And so that's why, I have a recording studio, but I'm not there right now. So, I'm in a mystery location on the Atlantic Ocean. So, so that's kind of the rough version, but, and our faith journey has been, kind of pretty standard for a cradle Catholic, I guess. Just that, we didn't know each other in our parish growing up, but we kind of grew up, how people kind of pick their standard assigned pews. And so we were kind of at one end and they were at the other end. And I recognized her dad as the, that one usher guy that you'd see every Sunday, and, that was just kind of what it was. It was just kind of going through the motions of faith. And it took kind of us meeting and being led to the fullness of what the Catholic faith really is, through just experiencing adoration and, other things like listening to relevant radio, like pretty standard story in terms of like, oh, this is really what it is, and then through that, after you go through that experience of having those things revealed, absolutely everything is affected by that forever. And there's just no other way around it. And so fortunately, that was before we had kids and even before we were married. So since then, everything is kind of informed by that. I guess I'll say that.
Definitely. I'd say like my wife and I had a very similar experience too. I'm a cradle Catholic. She was born Catholic and kind of fell away from the faith. And in college, it was like through our Newman Center and through Eucharistic adoration, where we grew to understand more and appreciate our faith. She was in confirmed, and but we had a very similar. So when you said that over, I was like, man, that's cool to see like how much Eucharistic adoration really impacting like a lot of couples right now. I mean, and it's such a
Yeah.
beautiful kind of thing. So tell me a bit about like starting um, all of your endeavors really, but like you kind of had a funny story behind your business name and how it started. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Okay. So I going back to college again, I got involved in the IEEE, which is like an engineering organization, and like this, it's just another professional organization for electrical engineers. And through that, we kind of fell into a consulting specific group, and I didn't really know what consulting was, and I knew it from like Dilbert cartoons and like that. That's all. That's the consultant in the corner that we bring in and pay to tell us things. But I learned that it's a real profession and that there are people that are independent and they either sole proprietors or founders of small companies that come in and help with engineering problems. And I grew up with in a household where my dad worked on the railroad and my mother worked in a pharmacy when we were older, and so I hadn't been exposed to any like real high technology professions at all, and except for just kind of being online since the 80s or so. And uh, I learned this idea of what it is to be unemployable and what it is to be somebody who's kind of destined to go off and do your own thing for better or worse. Some people go into that and crash and burn and end up opening a bait shop or whatever. And other people can find a way to sustain something. And so once I knew that was me, it was kind of always in my head. And so from college, I would do, my wife and I did wedding photography for a while and just did all kinds of different things where you're just kind of looking at it as what's just a way to get by and do something interesting and compelling and isn't what the standard, suburban dweller would do. And eventually, when we got married, I kind of thought, well, I can't just be this guy that just does things. Married people are supposed to have health insurance and be like grown-ups and have like real plans and things. So real married people, they have real jobs. And so I went and got this job, and we would kind of be disgruntled in the back corner, and we'd have these conversations, and I would just say, well, I'm just gonna go to a log cabin. I'm gonna start Krekeltronics, and that's gonna be what I'm gonna do. And I had that job for a while, and eventually got kind of burned out on it, and started this company. And I decided to call it Krakotronics because that was what we would joke about. And so then I feel kind of silly marketing that name because it's like it was never supposed to be a serious thing, and it doesn't sound very professional. But I would say by this point, kind of the work speaks for itself, and it kind of is what it is. So it might change eventually, but that's what it is right now. It's Krekeltronics. And then some years into it, we acquired this other company, Audiophile Engineering, that focuses on the music industry. And I'm a lifelong musician, played in bands, recorded a lot, played out a lot. And I just thought, so I could combine the technology product development with my favorite thing to do. I can't imagine a nicer combination of, taking your avocation and then integrating it with your kind of day-to-day job. That sounds really cool. I want to do that, even if it's really hard. And it turned out it was very difficult to do. And it's a very volatile industry, but it's still a lot of fun to work on, a guitar pedal that the Edge has in the his back room setup when he's playing a live show. And so that's what it is now. It's like, we work in the pet industry and some medical devices and, some avionics stuff and UAVs and all kinds of different things, as well as guitar effects pedals, audio interfaces, iPhone and DSLR microphones, and apps used by audio engineers and musicians around the world.
Very cool. Yeah. I mean, you don't have a permanent residence, right? Like you're always
we do.
kind of
I'm just joking around. We do.
But how often are you guys like moving around, and like how does that all work with like your job and your faith life? Like how does that all work? I guess I'm curious how that works for you guys.
That's a really good question. So there's a whole side topic that we could go off on into, like when people become these kind of country homesteaders and the city folk move out into the woods, and then where is your parish? Where is your community? And that's a real problem. And we could go on for an hour just on that topic alone and not come up with a solution, because there's no ideal answer. But if you feel compelled and called to have that experience, then that's just one of the things you need to be prepared for. You may be away from your family, but at the end of the day, you're going to have the surrounding that is there. And we prayed for solid 2 years every night. God, please help us to find a way to be surrounded by your creation, not man's creation. And we were in a situation in the city where every time we go for a bike ride, we'd see another, medical/office for lease in a place where there were just a couple remaining oak trees and pond. And like, do we need another office/medical facility? We really need to find a way to be surrounded by something that is just God's. And so we ended up being led to this place, and that's where it's like our homestead place, and that's what the homestead refers to. But there, it's a small town parish, and small town parishes being what they are, it's kind of us and mostly retirees. And so for kids, it isn't like there's an on fire youth group at a parish like that. It just is what it is. Brilliant, amazing pastor, very nice people, but it's not the same as being at the St. Paul Cathedral like we were before. It's not the same. It's not the same as our parish growing up, where there are probably 115 kids in the youth group and ski trips, every couple of weeks, So that's just how it is. And this other place that we go to in the summertime, where it's a different small town parish, and that has a different situation and different challenges. And so then, we're in the Duluth diocese where Father Mike Schmitz is. So like we try to, the kids go to all the camps that Father Mike is going to be at, and there are a lot of really on fire parishes in the Duluth diocese. And so we'll go out and find cool things. There are definitely amazing things going on in that diocese, but also some limitations depending on where you are. That's just a fact. But then when we're on the road, it's very fulfilling, because it's kind of like for the kids, just like we take the kids on the road to integrate them into giant cities or, public transportation or other kinds of things that you would never experience where we mostly live. They experience the most beautiful cathedrals and, the most reverent masses that you could imagine, and cool things, different approaches, and like burying the Alleluia and all these different kinds of things and traditions that exist in certain places, but not in others. And so, Ash Wednesday, we were at, or the Sunday before that, we were at the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Charleston, one of the most beautiful cathedrals that exists. And so in that, we kind of like restore our sense of, I know in the traditional side, we can get into kind of a battle about like, well, what language should everything be in? Or can things be in the vernacular? Or does everything have to be ad orientem? Or is only the traditional Latin Mass right? I'm not going to get into that, because I think those things tend to be used to divide us and to pit Catholics against each other. And we need to remember that the Mass is what matters. And there are many, I think Father Dwight Longenecker in Greenville, South Carolina, has it right in that there's a reverent approach to the Novus Ordo Mass too. And so we're kind of, when we're out traveling, we've been in so many different places and so many different basilicas and cathedrals and tiny places and huge places, that we have learned that there are some amazing approaches to faith that are beyond anything that we would conceive if we were just stuck on podcasts or in debates about Latin all the time. And the kids get to see that, and I'm happy that they're not sort of limited to just their local situation. So that it's kind of a roundabout way of answering, like, sometimes we're in these tiny, tiny little parishes. Sometimes we're in these giant places or back home at the cathedral. And that gives the kids a perspective that they definitely wouldn't have otherwise.
Totally. No, I love that so much. I love the way that you put all that. What's your advice to somebody who wants to be self-employed and maybe be on the move more and kind of live a lifestyle similar to yours, whether they have a family or not? What were some tips and tricks that you learned along the way to getting started?
I think that if you feel compelled to do it, you just do it. And especially if you're young, I always tell my kids, and they're like, no, Dad, you shouldn't say that. when I was 22, that would have been the time to, like, sleep under the cubicle and do the, 24 hours a day thing. Because at least if you're in technology and you're doing that kind of thing, that's something that you have time for when you're younger. And so if you're, 22, 24-year-old young professional and you feel like you have something to add, something to offer that's unique. And the most important thing that I would say is, if you really feel like you're not the person that's going to be best fit for the cubicle, there are a lot of people that flourish in that environment. And I don't have anything against that. I just know that it's not me. Most people, if you look statistically, most people have to end up in a cubicle because we can't all walk around on the beach doing our job on our phone. And, some people need to be doing that stuff or need to be, driving the school bus or all those things. There are many different professions and many different valuable vocations that we all contribute to make the world and society operate. But if you feel like, hey, I'm a little off, I'm not going to fit in so well in an office, I'm going to have a really hard time taking authority, even though that I know that I should, you probably should do it. And take the risk as early in your career as you can and try something. And if you don't get it quite right, and it does start to feel like a grind, people use that term, pivot to something else. And it might be radically different. It might be like looking for some elder who's got a business for sale, and you find a way to borrow money and buy that business to operate, whatever it is, a restaurant or an insurance office or whatever your thing is. It's not always a technology thing. If you feel like you're one of those people that needs to be kind of off on your own doing your thing, start as soon as you can.
Definitely. I guess next question I'm really curious about. So most people would assume that you're not a social media person, but you are. And so I'm interested in hearing what your thoughts are on social media and how you use it to storytell or like building personal brand. Like what's been your experience? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. Well, I told you in the email earlier that I'm kind of like on the downswing on it right now, but I perceive it to be an idol. I think that that's its ultimate temptation. And there are so many kind of fundamental broken things about what I would call legacy social media, where they own all your information. And so I don't want to be critical of anybody who's kind of like afraid about being out there publicly, covering their kids' faces and things like that, because I completely understand why they would do that. But I would just say to that specific person, this is not a business advisory, but just in general, if you're thinking about that, your private direct messages are insecure just as much. So you have to think about all your private communication too. All of that is ultimately ending up in a data store that, if you're a bad actor, you already have access to that. So if you're afraid of data leaking out, you really can't be using the stuff at all. We need to kind of reboot and start something different. So we're living in an era where everybody kind of wants their own stage, their own microphone, as it were, and their own PA and their own auditorium and everything. And everybody kind of is led to believe that they do have that. And so in that, we have an attenuation of conversations and a de-emphasis on authenticity and integrity. And so I am not perfect, but my attempt is to try to just be uncompromisingly authentic. And so whether that always comes across perfectly, I'm sure it doesn't. But that whole thing, it moves far too quickly for anyone to reasonably keep up. And so that's why people get burned out. Or you have to choose, like, right? Are you going to choose growing an audience versus your children and your spouse? Like, well, that's a bad call. Like, it's pretty obvious where you should be. But, if you feel yourself getting kind of pulled in that direction, you got to back off, or you might have to dump it all together, because it might not be a good thing. But I think I've kind of made peace with the fact that it's a reality. It is the public square, as it were, for today. And we might be able to build something new and better to take its place. But right now, those social media platforms are there, and that's where people are, right? So if you want to justify your identity or put yourself out there or say, hey, I'm an interesting person, maybe listen to me. Or like me, I'm out there saying, I want to collect interesting people because I can't be everywhere all the time. But there's a system where kind of everybody is. and it's pretty good at kind of gluing people together and saying, hey, what about this person? Even LinkedIn is pretty broken, but it's kind of randomly introduced. Hey, what about this person over here in San Francisco or Quebec or wherever they are, Denmark. I've had some really interesting connections just through that random stuff. So I think being on there, knowing what it is, not going too far into it, not feeling bad if it doesn't grow like you thought it would, but just being true and honest and having a clear understanding of what your boundaries are in terms of how far do you want to go in terms of giving away information. Nobody's really anonymous. I laugh at Twitter because everybody is on there kind of, well, I'm anonymous. It would not be difficult to know who any of you are.
Yeah.
And sorry, but that's just the case. Nobody is anonymous. So I always think it's kind of funny that people kind of present that way. I'm fully aware that anybody can figure out exactly who I am and what I do and where I come from. So I think just kind of using it for what it is and, building friendships. I mean, I was on little message boards in the 80s. Like I would go to the library and get this computer user magazine. And in the back of computer user magazine, it would have this list of phone numbers of bulletin board systems that you would dial up on your modem, your 300 bit per second modem. And then I would meet people, and I was the little nerdy, 10-year-old kid or whatever. I would meet cool people that would talk about things. And so it still works for that. It's a lot more difficult just because there's so much volume and so much noise, and most people really aren't all that interested in good things. They say they are, but most of the kind of good content is just there. It's orchestrated and it's there to distract, so that good, otherwise well-meaning people wouldn't notice something that actually would be good and decent, beautiful and honest. So we're kind of in that. It's like you and I are in this busy nightclub and there's just this haze and smoke and people yelling and clapping and some horrible music on the stage and everything. We're over here going saying the Jesus prayer or something like that. Like we're only going to have a few people around us and we have to be okay with that.
Right.
So as long as you recognize that and you know that there's this signal to noise ratio that's not going to be in your favor, it can be amazing. So, so I just kind of ebb and flow between, I'm into it. I'll do my best. I'll be okay. I'll try not to get too cynical to be like the most cynical possible negative person imaginable. And I don't want to let that happen. I think it's important for us to try to use it for what it is, and kind of leave it at that.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I think that's a good visual too, 'cause that's how I found it more lately as well.
Yeah.
No matter what platform you're on, there's a lot of content out there. And we can have the power to control kind of what we're seeing. And that's going to ebb and flow on day to day based off of what we're engaging with and what we're choosing to and eventually you can kind of find these pockets, but it's almost like a daily battle of staying in the pockets too, especially on short form video right now. I feel like it's changing so fast, and on any given day it knows your interests immediately. So if you're not being careful about tailoring your feed to, like you're saying, true, good, beautiful things, you're going to get caught up in the noise right away. I kind of want to pivot a little bit. I'm curious, how you work your prayer life and your business and your family, how you work all that, and what your advice would be to maybe younger you.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, good. So feeding into what you asked before, how we do kind of traveling and living in different places and like that, that's a related thread, because it depends on where we are and what we're doing. If we're living in a small RV like we are right now, it's totally different than when I have a separate building that I can go off to. So in our normal situation, I have a building that we built. And so I would say, that would be a piece of advice to anybody who's thinking of being independent. If you're so lucky to have the property to make a separate place to be, that's kind of your sanctuary for work, but also for making sure that you're engaged with your faith. And so when I'm there, kind of in the steady state, it's going out there and it's praying the Lorica of St. Patrick and it's exercising, because like to me those two things are tightly intertwined. It's to ensure that we're glorifying God through our worship, but also through respecting the body that he gave us and saying like, I want to make sure that I'm, you know, reminding myself that that's important, because we can kind of forget and that can trail off. But then for me, it's making the effort to, I could be out there 10 hours working, but I have to make the effort to go in for lunch, or I have to make the effort to, if it's a really nice day and I hear, some giggles outside, to go and do some crazy walk or swinging or other some kind of archery thing or whatever kind of weird stuff is going on outside, engage in that too. So for me, it's a little bit easier there, because I can kind of say, I'm going into this other situation. That's where work happens. And then I can do the work for as long as I need to. But then also, we kind of have these rules of, we're always going to eat lunch and dinner together, and we're going to be together as much as we can. We're together all the time because we have kids that are homeschooled. On one hand, we're kind of like, we're fortunate that we have that option, but also there were hard decisions that we had to make that even possible. So, we made those decisions, and we are kind of like sticking to the commitment that we made to follow through with that. Now, when we're traveling, because, if you live in northern Minnesota and it gets to February, we love wintertime, but it gets to the point that you need kind of some sun and vitamin D, and you need active, things. And, especially this winter where it's kind of a brown, brown winter without a lot going on. I know what it's like there right now. We get to the point that we need to go and find the sun. And that's what we do. We find the sun for months. And so when we're in a small trailer, I will do the same thing. I'll just pray silently the Loric of St. Patrick, and then find a way to crawl off and do exercising somewhere else. But as a family, we pray the St. Michael prayer a lot. We pray the Sacred Heart of Jesus prayer a lot. And also just, not like, we have older kids too, like our older kids are teenagers. And so it's not kind of babying them, but it's giving them the same reminder that I need. And that is, when they wake up, remind them to say some prayer of gratitude to God, just for the most simple thing. Like, you're upright, you have this day, like, you're expected to do things. And if you crawl off and you're not achieving anything, well, you're not making good on that commitment. And so it's a constant conversation, and it helps me to do that for them, because I know that I need that too, that in every breath we need to kind of re-engage and remind ourselves that is our purpose, we have these gifts. We all have different gifts. We're meant to discover them, and then we're meant to apply them to very specific things. And that's like the most fun adventure that you could imagine, because you were made for a specific thing, like a fingerprint, as unique as a fingerprint, or the retina in your eye, and that we get to do that, and then we get to watch these little people also do that. It's like the coolest thing imaginable. So the challenges are just that, two of the kids are in college, and the two littler ones, like they are really interested in a lot of things too, and they want to play pickleball in the middle of the day, or they want to work on a project or all of that. And so, but I can't get upset about that. I can't lament the fact that those things are happening, because we created the lifestyle that leads to those interactions happening. So that, I'll just be frank with you. Like, I have been, like I said, independent for like 20 years, more than 20 years, 11 years in this latest venture. And there's a business cost to living the way that we do. We have travel days. Sometimes those travel days are during the week. We have, prayer obligations, or, historical sites that we're visiting, or special spiritual sites that we're visiting. That might be the same day as some important meeting is supposed to happen. I will tend to prioritize away from the business side. And so, could I be a lot more financially successful and be in some corner office somewhere? Like, yeah, probably, but I wouldn't be with them, and I wouldn't be, and they would be more likely. I think kids with parents that do those things can turn out great. Like, we have friends that are professionals, and their kids are amazing and wonderful and great piano players and all of that. But I want to see what these kids become, and I want to be there during that period. And that's just important to us. So that's no judgment on people that make different decisions. It's just, we have decided that the way that we want to do it, all the way through to their, turning 18, and hopefully getting an associate's degree when they finish high school, is that we were there for that, that we were all together the whole time.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I think what you described to me is like what a lot of people, at least in my generation, I feel like in conversations I'm having with friends, and that's like the new definition of wealthy, is exactly what you explained, is like, it's not having more money, it's being able to prioritize family and have that healthy balance. I think that's really beautiful that you found that. What's your number one piece of advice that you would give other Catholic entrepreneurs, just in general with any business? Like, what's your number one thing?
Don't be afraid to go into business doing something that you love, because a lot of people are afraid to integrate their hobby because they think it'll kind of spoil it. And just in my experience, it hasn't done that. If anything, I play music more now than I did before I was doing music technology. So don't be afraid to do that. If you love cooking, open a restaurant. If you love, prayer, create a Hallow competitor. If you want to, get into, if you love building things, you want to start a construction company, just do it. Don't be afraid to integrate your vocation in your avocation, because I think it can be really beautiful. But also the converse of that is, don't be afraid if the thing that you really feel like you could do a great job at is like diametrically opposed from the thing that you love to do, and it ends up just being a thing that you kind of put in a box. That's okay too. If it's the thing that allows you to live the life that you envision that you want to live, I think that's great. Maybe that'll make it easier. So, that's kind of the two sides of that card, I guess.
Absolutely. Where can people keep up with you? I mean, like, what are some places they can find, Krekeltronics and kind of what you're up to?
Yeah. Okay. So we have Krekeltronics.com, and Audiophile is audiophile.engineering. And so both of those are focused on technology product development, Apple platform, electronic firmware and hardware. And then we have a Twitter account that I'm playing around with called Off-Gridding. And that is kind of me being my goofy self and seeing what happens.
Perfect. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat. Really excited for the listeners to hear this one. And yeah, very valuable lesson. So appreciate your time, and God bless, and stay warm. I'm glad that you're finding the sun, because that's what I need right now, is the sun. So we're hoping it's coming here soon. But
alrighty. Well, come on down anytime, Mitch.
Will do. You have a good one, Patrick.
All right. God bless, Mitch. See you now.